I knew trouble was brewing the second I saw the HOA president, Wanda Reynolds, marching up my private road in her ridiculous neon pink blazer and perfectly styled helmet of blonde hair. Behind her, a convoy of heavy machinery rumbled ominously: tractors, backhoes, and a couple of workers in neon vests who looked like they had no idea what they were getting into. I stepped onto my porch, arms crossed, watching in disbelief as the lead tractor rolled right up to the edge of my property. Wanda's sharp, nasal voice cut through the morning air like nails on a chalkboard. "Mr. Vaughn Tate," she announced, as if she were addressing a courtroom instead of my front yard. "We've decided that your road needs to be repaved to better match the community aesthetic." I raised an eyebrow. "My private road, the one I maintain with my own money." "The one that isn't even part of the HOA," she waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Technicalities. It's an eyesore compared to the rest of the neighborhood. The board voted unanimously to improve it." I let out a slow breath through my nose. "Let me get this straight. You, without my permission, hired a crew to tear up my road, the road I paid for on my own land." "Exactly," she said, beaming like she'd just solved world hunger. "It'll be much nicer when we're done, and don't worry, we'll send you the bill." I blinked. "You're going to charge me for destroying my own road?" "Of course," she said, as if I were the idiot here. "It's only fair that the costs are shared among all homeowners." I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I kept my face neutral. I'd dealt with plenty of people like Wanda in my career. She had no idea who she was messing with. "Move your equipment," I said, voice calm but firm. "Right now." She laughed a shrill, condescending sound. "Oh, Mr. Tate, you're not in charge here. The Homeowners Association is." I looked past her at the workers who had started tearing into the gravel with their machines. Deep gashes marred the once pristine road leading to my property. They had already done significant damage. I exhaled slowly. "Wanda, I'm giving you one last chance. Get them off my land. Now." She folded her arms, a smug grin plastered across her face. "Or what?" I pulled out my phone and snapped a few pictures. "Or you're going to find out exactly what happens when you illegally destroy the property of a man who makes a living in the courtroom." Her smirk faltered. "What are you talking about?" I gave her a slow, deliberate look. "Wanda, I'm a lawyer, a very good lawyer, and you just made the dumbest mistake of your life." Wanda's confident expression wavered, but she wasn't ready to back down just yet. She adjusted her blazer, probably trying to regain whatever authority she thought she had, and turned to the workers. "Keep going," she ordered. "This is HOA jurisdiction now." The workers hesitated. They could sense the tension, and at least one of them looked downright uncomfortable. They weren't HOA members, they were just hired contractors, and now they were realizing they might have stepped into something ugly. I took a step forward, locking eyes with the man in charge of the crew. He had a weathered face, the kind that had seen more than a few bad jobs in his day. "Do you have a signed work order from me?" I asked him directly. "Because this is private property, and if you don't, you're trespassing and committing property damage." The foreman shifted uneasily. "We were hired by the HOA. They said they had permission." "They lied," I said flatly and held up my phone. "I've already documented the damage and your equipment on my property. If you continue, every single one of you will be named in the lawsuit." That got their attention. The foreman turned to Wanda. "Ma'am, we're not getting involved in legal trouble. If this guy owns the land and didn't sign off, we can't do this." Wanda's face turned a deep shade of red. "You're under contract. You have to finish the job." "Actually," I cut in, "they don't. And if you push them to keep going, you're the one footing the bill for the damages, the legal fees, and whatever else I decide to pursue in court." The foreman muttered something under his breath, then waved at his crew. "Shut it down. We're done here." The workers immediately began pulling back their equipment, reversing the damage as best they could before leaving. Wanda watched in growing horror as her grand plan unraveled in front of her. "You can't do this," she snapped at me. "The HOA has authority over common areas," I corrected. "Not private property, and since you clearly don't understand the law, allow me to educate you." I pulled up a legal document on my phone and turned the screen toward her. "This is my deed. See that boundary line? That means you had no right to order this work. You and the HOA just committed property destruction and trespassing, and since this was an organized effort, I might even push for criminal charges." Wanda's bravado cracked. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, clearly scrambling for a way out. "Now," I continued, my voice calm but firm, "you have two options. You can compensate me for the damage your little stunt caused in writing today, or I'll see you in court where you and the HOA will be paying a lot more than just repair costs." She clenched her fists. "This is absurd." "You're threatening me." "No," I said, "I'm holding you accountable, something you're clearly not used to." For the first time since she arrived, Wanda looked genuinely unsure of herself. She glanced around as if hoping someone would back her up, but her audience had vanished. The workers were gone, and even a few curious neighbors who had wandered over to watch were now whispering among themselves, casting judgmental glances in her direction. Realizing she had no support, Wanda straightened her shoulders and tried to salvage what little dignity she had left. "I need to consult the board," she muttered. "You do that," I said, "but don't take too long. If I don't see an official offer of compensation in my inbox by the end of the day, I'll be filing my lawsuit first thing in the morning." She spun on her heel and stormed off, her once confident stride now stiff and forced. As she disappeared down the street, I let out a slow breath. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But now, Wanda and her little HOA empire knew what they were up against, and I wasn't backing down. By late afternoon, I still hadn't received any kind of offer from Wanda or the HOA. Not that I expected her to suddenly develop common sense, but I had given her a fair shot to avoid what was coming next. I spent the evening compiling documentation. Every photo, every video, every witness statement from the neighbors who had watched the fiasco unfold. I had property records proving I owned the road outright, legal precedents showing the HOA had zero claim over it, and a list of damages that would make even the most reckless board member think twice. Then, I drafted the lawsuit. Wanda wasn't just facing civil damages. I was pushing for criminal trespassing and property destruction charges. She had orchestrated the entire thing, meaning she was personally liable, and if I had to drag the HOA through the mud along with her, so be it. The next morning, I made sure she got the message loud and clear. I had a courier hand deliver the legal notice to her front door. A formal complaint detailing every violation she and her little regime had committed, along with an official demand letter. "Pay up for the damages immediately or we go to court." By noon, I got a call from an unknown number. Wanda's voice came through the line, the usual arrogance replaced with thinly veiled panic. "This is completely unnecessary," she said without preamble. "We can resolve this like adults." I leaned back in my chair. "That's exactly what I tried to do yesterday. You ignored me." "You're being unreasonable," she shot back. "Dragging this into court benefits no one." I let a pause hang between us. "It benefits me." A sharp exhale crackled through the receiver. "You don't actually want to go through with this." "I wouldn't have sent the papers if I wasn't serious," I said. "Now, are you calling to make a proper settlement offer or are you wasting my time?" She hesitated. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "The board is willing to discuss a compromise," she finally said. "Not interested in negotiations," I replied. "You damaged my property, you pay for the repairs plus legal fees. That's non-negotiable." "You're acting like I personally bulldozed your road," she snapped. "You personally ordered it," I reminded her. "That makes you responsible." Silence. Then a forced chuckle. "You really think a judge is going to side with you over the HOA?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." Another pause. She was running out of options and she knew it. "There's no need to escalate this," she said, voice tight. "Let's be reasonable." "I was reasonable," I countered. "You ignored me. Now we do things the hard way." Her breath hitched. "This could ruin me." Should have thought about that before you brought in the tractors, I said. I ended the call. That afternoon, my inbox lit up with an official response from the HOA's legal team. A hastily written offer to cover part of the damages if I agreed to drop the case. I sent back a counteroffer, full payment, an official apology, and Wanda's resignation as HOA president. They had 24 hours to decide before I filed the lawsuit. The next morning, I checked my email and found exactly what I expected: a weak counteroffer from the HOA's legal team. They proposed covering only half the damages, with no mention of Wanda stepping down. It was a desperate attempt to minimize their losses, and it wasn't going to fly. I didn't bother responding. I had already given them their chance to settle. Instead, I drove straight to the county courthouse and officially filed my lawsuit. The clerk stamped the documents, and just like that, the HOA was formally being sued for property damage, trespassing, and legal fees. Wanda was named personally as the primary defendant. By early afternoon, I got a call from a number I recognized as belonging to the HOA's attorney, a man named Richard Halstead. He was a slick, corporate type who probably thought he could talk me into backing down. He wasted no time getting to his point. "This lawsuit is excessive," Richard said, his voice clipped. "You could have handled this through arbitration instead of dragging it into court." "I gave Wanda that option," I replied. "She ignored it. Now it's too late for arbitration." Richard let out a slow breath as if he were dealing with a difficult child. "The board is willing to increase their offer slightly, 60% of the repair costs, and we consider the matter closed." "Full payment plus Wanda's resignation," I said. "That's unreasonable," Richard countered. "You're making this personal." "It became personal when she ordered construction crews onto my land without permission," I said. "She's unfit to lead and the board knows it. That's why they're scrambling to protect her instead of letting her handle this herself." Richard was silent for a moment. He knew I was right. The board was trying to contain the damage because they knew this lawsuit had teeth. "You won't win as easily as you think," he finally said. I chuckled. "I'm looking forward to watching you try to convince a judge that an HOA has the right to destroy private property and send the bill to the owner." Richard sighed, clearly frustrated. "We'll be in touch." That evening, I decided to pay a visit to a few neighbors who had been watching the situation unfold. I knocked on the door of an older couple, the Parkers, who lived a few houses down. They had been in the neighborhood for decades and knew more about how the HOA operated than anyone else. "Mr. Parker answered the door, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Ah, Vaughn, I was hoping you'd stop by. Come in, come in." I stepped inside and was immediately hit with the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Mrs. Parker was already pouring a cup for me before I could even sit down. "We heard about the lawsuit," she said, handing me the mug. "It's about time someone stood up to them," Mr. Parker nodded. "Wanda's been running this HOA like her personal kingdom for years. You wouldn't believe the nonsense she's pulled." "Try me," I said, taking a sip of coffee. Mrs. Parker leaned forward. "A few years ago, she tried to force a couple out of the neighborhood because their house didn't fit the aesthetic. Claimed it violated some obscure bylaw, but when they pushed back, she started issuing fines for ridiculous things: grass half an inch too tall, flower pots in the wrong color, that sort of thing. They ended up selling just to get away from her," Mr. Parker added, "and that's just one example." I set my mug down. "Has anyone ever taken legal action against her before?" Mr. Parker shook his head. "Most people don't have the time or energy to fight her. She knows that. She bullies people until they give in." Mrs. Parker glanced at me. "But she picked the wrong person this time, didn't she?" I gave them a small smile. "She did, and when I'm done, she won't be bullying anyone ever again." Over the next few days, word about the lawsuit spread like wildfire. Several neighbors reached out, eager to share their own horror stories about Wanda's abuses of power. I collected statements from homeowners who had been unfairly fined, threatened, or harassed. It was clear that this lawsuit wasn't just about my road, it was about years of unchecked corruption. Then something interesting happened. I received an anonymous tip in my mailbox. No name, no return address, just a thick envelope stuffed with documents. Inside, I found financial records detailing thousands of dollars in HOA funds that had been allocated to administrative expenses that just so happened to coincide with Wanda's personal vacations and shopping sprees. There were invoices for luxury hotels, designer clothing stores, and even a home renovation project all paid for with HOA money. I stared at the documents, barely able to contain my grin. Wanda hadn't just overstepped with my property, she had been embezzling money from the HOA. And now I had proof. I spent the next few hours meticulously analyzing the financial records from the anonymous tip. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Wanda had been siphoning HOA funds for years, disguising personal expenses under vague administrative labels. There were payments to high-end salons, reservations at a 5-star resort, and even invoices for home renovations that suspiciously matched the work done on her property. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was fraud. I knew exactly what to do next. I compiled a thorough report and made multiple copies, one for my lawsuit file, another for the county's fraud division, and a third for the HOA's general membership. If Wanda thought she could bully her way out of this, she was about to learn a hard lesson in accountability. By the next evening, I had arranged a special homeowners meeting. Officially, it was scheduled to discuss ongoing financial concerns. In reality, it was about to become Wanda's downfall. The community center was packed by the time I arrived. Residents filled every seat, murmuring among themselves, clearly aware that something big was about to happen. At the front of the room, Wanda sat stiffly, flanked by a few loyal board members who looked far less confident than usual. I walked to the front, dropped a thick folder onto the table, and let the weight of the evidence speak for itself. "I'm here because the HOA has been misusing funds," I said, addressing the crowd, "and I have proof." Wanda immediately stiffened. "This is outrageous. If you have concerns, you could have brought them to the board privately." I ignored her. "For years, this HOA has been collecting dues under the guise of neighborhood improvements, but a significant portion has been funneled into unauthorized expenses." I turned to the crowd. "How many of you have been hit with arbitrary fines? Ever wonder where that money really goes?" A ripple of muttering spread through the room. I flipped open the folder. "Here's a payment labeled as an operational expense, in reality, a weekend at a luxury spa." I pulled out another sheet. "This one, a community beautification project. It covered brand new kitchen appliances for Wanda." Gasps erupted from the homeowners. Wanda's face darkened. "This is slander," I met her glare. "It's documented fraud. And I've already forwarded everything to the county fraud division." The room exploded into chaos. Homeowners shot out of their seats, demanding explanations. Board members exchanged nervous glances. Wanda's hands clenched into fists as she struggled to regain control. "You have no authority to investigate HOA finances," she snapped. "I don't need authority when the evidence speaks for itself," I replied. "You stole from these people, and now you're going to answer for it." A man near the back of the room stood up. "I demand a vote to remove Wanda as HOA president, effective immediately." A chorus of agreement followed. Wanda's face turned pale, but she wasn't done fighting. "This meeting isn't official. You can't just throw me out because of baseless accusations." I pulled out my phone. "Then maybe the fraud unit will be more convincing. I sent them everything an hour ago. They should be here any minute." The panic in her eyes was unmistakable. The doors swung open, and two officials in suits entered, scanning the room before locking onto Wanda. One of them held up a badge. "Wanda Reynolds," she bolted. Shoving past stunned homeowners, she made a desperate dash for the exit, but she didn't get far. The officials were faster, blocking her escape before she even reached the door. "You're under investigation for financial misconduct," one of them said. "We need you to come with us." Wanda's defiance cracked. "This is a misunderstanding." The official didn't look convinced. Then you won't mind answering some questions down at the station. The room was dead silent as they led her away. The moment the doors closed behind her, the tension broke. A mix of shock and relief rippled through the crowd. Someone let out a disbelieving laugh. An elderly woman near the front shook her head. "About time." I turned to the remaining board members. "This HOA needs new leadership. And I suggest the new board start by revising policies to prevent this from happening again." There was no argument. By the end of the night, Wanda was officially removed from her position, and the HOA was forced to issue refunds for unjustified fines. Homeowners left the meeting with a renewed sense of control over their own community. As for Wanda, she spent the next few months buried in legal battles. The fraud investigation uncovered even more financial misdeeds, and she eventually struck a deal to avoid jail time on the condition that she never hold a position in an HOA again. Justice was served, and my private road. The HOA not only paid for the repairs in full, but they also issued a formal apology. I made sure to frame it. The HOA board wasted no time distancing themselves from Wanda. Within days of her removal, they held an emergency meeting to overhaul leadership and review every financial decision she had made during her reign. The homeowners, now fully aware of the extent of her corruption, weren't in a forgiving mood. Several residents demanded a full forensic audit of the HOA's finances, and the newly appointed interim president, a retired accountant named Marjorie Kessler, made it clear that transparency would be the new standard. With Wanda gone, I turned my focus to ensuring the HOA followed through on their commitment to repair my road. They had agreed to cover the full cost, but I wasn't about to take their word for it. I had the contract drawn up by my own legal team, making sure every detail was airtight. The board signed without hesitation, eager to avoid further legal trouble. A reputable construction crew, one I personally selected, arrived to fix the damage. Unlike Wanda's hired goons, these workers knew what they were doing. They removed the deep gouges in the gravel, reinforced the foundation, and even upgraded the drainage system at no extra cost, a small concession from the HOA to make amends for their disastrous mistake. As the road was restored, I noticed a shift in the neighborhood. People who had once kept their heads down, afraid of Wanda's retaliation, now spoke openly about their grievances. Stories emerged of homeowners who had been hit with fabricated violations, forced into unnecessary renovations, or pressured into selling their homes. The more I listened, the clearer it became this neighborhood had been living under a regime of fear, and Wanda had ruled with an iron fist. The Parkers, who had been among the first to support me, invited me over for dinner to celebrate the victory. As I sat at their dining table enjoying a home-cooked meal, Mr. Parker leaned forward with a thoughtful expression. "I have to ask, Vaughn," he said, setting down his fork. "Did you always plan to go after Wanda like that, or was it just about the road at first?" I took a sip of my drink before answering. At the start, it was about the road, but the more I saw, the more I realized she wasn't just a nuisance, she was a full-blown tyrant. Once I got my hands on those financial records, I knew I had to take her down completely. Mrs. Parker nodded approvingly. "She never thought anyone would fight back, that's why she got so bold," Mr. Parker chuckled. "Well, she picked the wrong person to mess with." The conversation shifted to the future of the HOA. With Wanda gone, there was an opportunity to rebuild the organization into something that actually served the community instead of exploiting it. Marjorie, the new president, had already proposed several reforms, including eliminating unnecessary fines and making board meetings more accessible to homeowners. I had no intention of joining the HOA myself, but I did agree to serve as a legal consultant to ensure they stayed on the right track. The last thing I wanted was for another power-hungry dictator to take Wanda's place. A week after the road was fully repaired, I received an unexpected visitor. A man in a dark suit stood outside my door, holding a briefcase. He introduced himself as an investigator from the state's fraud division. "We traced the financial discrepancies back several years," he explained. "Wanda wasn't just misusing HOA funds, she was running a full-scale embezzlement operation. She funneled money through fake contractors, used HOA accounts to pay personal debts, and even set up a shell company to disguise her transactions." I wasn't surprised. Wanda had always acted like she was untouchable, and people like that rarely operated within the law. The investigator handed me a document. "She's facing multiple charges, including fraud, misappropriation of funds, and tax evasion. Her assets are being seized to repay the stolen money. Homeowners will be reimbursed for the fraudulent fines she imposed." I glanced over the document. Wanda's downfall was complete. Not only had she lost her position, but she was also facing prison time. "Good," I said, handing the papers back. "People like her deserve to face the consequences." The investigator nodded. "Thanks to your lawsuit, we were able to dig deeper. You did the neighborhood a favor." As he left, I stood on my newly restored road, taking in the peaceful evening. The air was crisp, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple. For the first time since moving here, I felt a sense of real community. People were no longer afraid to speak up, and the HOA was finally working for the residents instead of against them. Wanda had thought she could bulldoze over me literally and figuratively. But in the end, she was the one who got flattened. Justice had been served, and the neighborhood was better for it.